This is one of my little one-off ideas, everybody. Welcome to the Unlikely Rank Heroes episode. And I haven't decided exactly what the end goal is for today's show, but it was something that popped into my head, and I thought this could be kind of fun because it isolates a specific set of players that are not where you thought they'd be. In today's episode, we're going to look at the unlikeliest member of each 12 rank chunk, meaning first round, second round, third round of a typical 12-team league. We're going off the Basketball Monster rank page, so this is just what guys have done so far this season and the most unlikely player, in my opinion, that we're seeing in each one. I failed, mind you, I tried to pick players that were not in a specific spot because of injury. Because with those, it's like, okay, this is why they're there. This is an easy one to write off. I wanted to pick guys that were in a place that you just didn't expect them to be, or maybe you didn't expect them to be quite this far in a particular direction, but without a super obvious reason why the thing that's allowing them to be there is happening. I am Dan Bespers. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Find me on social at Dan Bespers, DanBesbris. That last name again is Besbris. And this podcast is brought to you by Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. They've got the earliest odds. They've got live in-game betting. Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to bet on the game while you watch, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to basketball to hockey to entertainment to political props. Yeah, I know, a day for that one, isn't it? Head to Bet Online today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online, the game starts here. Let's see what we can take away from today's episode. First of all, hit that like button. That's actually super important. I know that it's surprising, honestly, but like a big chunk of likes and a big chunk of you guys viewing it right when a show drops is weirdly helpful for the various algorithms that develop these things. Subscribe if you like what we're doing here at Old Man Squad, and drop that 5-star review over on Apple or Spotify. Surprise is the very first slide. It has no bearing on anything. It's mostly just that these are surprise players, but this is what we're talking about today. These are the players that are the most surprising to find in each round of rank data right now. This is based on not preseason, not projection. This is what's happened to this point. 2 weeks of basketball. This is where the guys are ranked. So let's ask the question of why it matters. Well, we'll determine how numbers can be funny, because some of these guys are where they are because numbers are funny. Some of these guys are where they are because they're legitimately great or bad. And some of them, maybe it's a mirage. So let's dig in on these 8 players. We're going to do the first 8 rounds because after basically pick 100, it kind of doesn't really matter anymore. And we'll start at the top with the most unlikely first rounder right now, and that is Jordan Poole. And I don't think anybody is really close on this one because everybody else in the first round was drafted within the top 25, basically. You've got Jokic, you got AD, you got Shea, you got Kat, Tatum, Holmgren, who, by the way, is this... Oh, no, that's not true. Nikola Vucevic is also in the top 12. And he was drafted like around 55. So maybe he's the second least likely to be there. But then you got Wemby, Sabonis, Trae Young, Devin Booker, a lot of guys that you'd expect to be up near the top. But Jordan Poole at number 7, averaging 22.2 points, 4.4 threes, 1 rebound. He's doing this with 1 rebound a game, 5.4 assists, 2.8 steals, 0.6 blocks, and 46.94 are the splits, field goal, free throw percent, 3.4 turnovers per game as well. Obviously, the big things that jump out at us are the 4.4 three-pointers and the 2.8 steals per game. And Poole's fine at steals. He's not elite. Usually you expect him in full starters minutes to be around 1.2, something like that. And this is more than double that. So we know it's coming down. But what are we learning about Jordan Poole? Because an article came out on Monday morning talking about how some of what the Wizards are doing is actually what's allowing Jordan Poole to get more deflections and more steals. Is it going to be close to 3 all season long? No, because you can look at the steals leaderboard from every year for about the past 3 decades, and nobody's doing that. In fact, that's kind of a fun exercise. Why don't we look at the top steals guy? Just pick a random year from the last 20. Who was number 1 that season? 2014, Kawhi Leonard at 2.3. How about 2009? Who was the top steals guy in 2009? Rajon Rondo, 2.3. 2013? Who was it? Come on, baby. Load it up. Let me see. Chris Paul at 2.5. Wow, that was a big one. He was number 3 in all of fantasy basketball there. Ricky Rubio at 2.3. Listen, all of this is just a silly tangential thought to explain Jordan Poole's not going to average 2.8 steals per game. It's just not going to happen. I don't care how good he is at steals this year. That's not going to stick. But what are we seeing about Poole right now? Is there something about what's happened so far that's actually repeatable? And the answer is kinda. The scoring is somewhat repeatable. The assists are somewhat repeatable. The threes, 4.4 is a pretty damn big number. He's always been a great foul shooter, 94%, maybe not. But there actually isn't as much that you'd expect to fall off a cliff here as the numbers might indicate. The big one is really just steals. So what happens to Poole's numbers if he's league average in steals? If he's at like 1.1, 1.2 instead of 2.8? He's still a third rounder. So I think, and we did a show about whether you should sell high or not on certain guys. And Jordan Poole's one of those ones where, like, if you're getting top 40, you do it. But if you're not getting something that good, you don't do it. So yeah, he's extremely unlikely and surprising to find in the first round. But this could very well just be a top 40 season from Jordan Poole. Second round, Buddy Hield at number 13. And this was one where the lines were blurred a little bit because Hield got off to a really good start. He was like, I think he was ranked in the 20s after a couple of ball games. And then Steph and Andrew Wiggins went down. And Hield's minutes and touches got even higher from that point. And now he's full-on lost his mind. Buddy is averaging 15 shots in 25 minutes a ball game. The usage right now is just beyond off the charts. And he happens to be shooting 52% from the field and 52% from downtown. Look, Hield's a good three-point shooter. That's always been the case. His career 40% are from downtown on pretty damn high volume. But he is not this good from downtown. 52% on almost 10 a game. And I mean, the rate that he's taking them is extraordinary. So we know this isn't going to last. We also know that teams tend to sort of realize what they don't have in Buddy Hield. And right now, what they do have, and this is looking more at the games that Steph was there, is a guy that's willing to go out there and take a dozen shots in 20 minutes a game and pray that they go in. And they did. He's averaging 5 threes a game on less than 10 three-point tries per ball game. But since Steph went down, he's taking 17 shots a night. Prior to that, it was 13 in about 18 minutes a ball game. That's just not going to last. The highest usage guys in the NBA don't take shots that quickly. So this whole, the Hield one to me is a colossal mirage. And I think most of the teams in your league are going to agree with that. So it creates this weird headbutting of people trying to sell high on Buddy Hield and no one wanting to buy on Buddy Hield. So what do? If you don't have Hield, just let it alone. Don't worry about it. His threes are going to come down. You know, the most he's ever averaged in a season was 4, and that was back when he was in Sacramento about 5 years ago, and he was playing 34 minutes a game at that point. This year he's at 25, and a lot of that's because Steph's been out, and Melton, and Wiggins until the last one. If you have Buddy Hield, ride the wave, I guess. Steph is expected, I'm recording this show before the Warriors game on Monday night, but Steph, as of the time of recording this show, was being ruled in. So my expectation, and I don't know what the DeAnthony Melton absence is going to do to Buddy Hield's minutes. Is it going to come all the way back down to 18 or 19? Or is he going to be somewhere in the middle there at like 22 or 23 or something like that? But either way, I don't expect this dude to take 15 shots in 25 minutes a game. Everywhere else he's been in his career, in 25 minutes a game, he's been around 11 or 12 shots. One every other minute or so, which is still a very high number. But it ain't this. It ain't what he's doing right now. This is nuts. So expect Buddy Hield to likely taper, the kindest way that I can possibly put it. Tari Eason at number 35, and some of this is because he's coming off a massive ball game in the Rockets' big come-from-behind forcing of overtime, but then ultimately losing of that game. And some of it's because he's at 3.2 defensive stats in 20 minutes a night. Some of it's because he's shooting 56% from the field. However you roll it up, Tari Eason's been awesome so far. And I drafted him in a few spots, and I dropped him in one of them because I'm a dummy. But he was always one of my favorite, like, go give it a try guys as kind of the last round of flyers. Basically, he was the last group of players that I listed in my buckets, and I'm regretting Gary Trent Jr. being in this board anywhere. But I thought there was always hope that Tari Eason could be something because of how fast he does get stats. I didn't think it was going to be anything like this. I thought we'd be lucky if he could push up near top 100, and he's number 35. So I do not want to try to claim that I had any idea this was coming. But whoever, analysts, we know what Tari Eason can do. He's a terrific rebounder. He's a terrific steals guy. It all comes down to whether or not he's going to have minutes. The fear, of course, here is the minutes are not going to hold from what they were in this last ball game, and they're sort of inflated by that ball game to 20 and a half minutes a game. We're talking about a guy that was more like 18 prior to that, and in 18 minutes, he's not going to get 3 defensive stats a game. It just doesn't happen. Even, and I had a reference to this dude last week, even the mighty Nerlens Noel was not able to put up fantasy stats that quickly. Jonathan Isaac needed more than 18 minutes to get there. Could Tari Eason be sort of Jonathan Isaac-like in gathering fantasy stats, and could 20 minutes be enough for him? Yeah, I mean, he could push top 100 in 20 minutes, but there's going to be a drop-off here. And much like with Buddy Hield, you're not going to be able to sell on Tari Eason because no one's looking at a dude playing 20 minutes a night and posting these numbers and thinking, oh, yeah, that's the guy I got to go get. Maybe from a dynasty perspective, they might be. That's a very different show than what we're putting together right now. And so I have these two competing thoughts in my brain, one of which is I love Tari Eason's fantasy game. I want to make sure he's on my roster somewhere. But the other one is I can't roster a dude that's playing 18 minutes a night. It's just not a sustainable long-term solution. Head-to-head, I think you roll with him. He's been so good, and he's going so nuts that you at least wait until he cools off. Roto, maybe it's a bit more of a spot play thing, a guy that you hang on to, and you play him if you think the game's going to be a blowout. You play him if there's a Rocket that's hurt, because you take one 30-minute guy out of the equation, and Eason gets 5 minutes, and Amen Thompson gets 6 or 7 of those minutes, and all of a sudden, then he's a more reliable play. But I don't know. Like with Roto, I don't know how you play him every day right now. That's a huge dice roll. Big time favorite here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Bilal Coulibaly is at 38. And look, Bilal's been amazing so far this year. I don't know why I keep saying look like I'm talking to someone. I'm not. You guys are all out there listening after the fact. Coulibaly is shooting 61% from the field right now. If you don't see a number on this board that says unsustainable, that's the one. I love the aggression. I think that could hold the boards, the steals. Like, there are a lot of things with Bilal that I think could actually hold steady. The 60% from the field is just not one of them. I don't think you're going to be able to get anything better than about top 80 for him right now if you tried to offer him up in a trade. So my recommendation on Coulibaly is to pretty much sit on him. Just see how it goes. And the longer that he's productive, the better a return you would get on a trade. And so you just kind of hope that the hot streak continues longer than it is. But I love him. I think he's going to be a fantasy start all season long. But we also have to be aware that 60% is just not going to hold. Lou Dort at number 58 is my most unlikely fifth rounder because we've watched Lou Dort for many seasons at this point, and he is unbelievably consistent in what he does on the basketball court, and more specifically from a fantasy standpoint. From on the basketball court, he's an amazing defender. He is like the strongest dude on the floor at basically every single moment. And from a numbers standpoint, he's going to put up a little more than a point per field goal attempt. And then all of a sudden this year, he's at 1.5 points per field goal attempt. Lou Dort is shooting 48% from downtown. He's a career 35%er, and last year was a career high at 39. He's shooting 90% at the free throw line. He's a career 80%er. He's shooting 51% overall from the field when he's a career 40%er. His steals are up from a career mark of 0.9 to 1.2. His blocks have basically doubled in the block rate this season. His rebounds and his assists have stayed exactly the same. So there's all this stuff that's happening for Dort right now. And you could argue, maybe he's in a better position this year. Maybe, the guys around him have created a situation where defensively he can take more risks. But I don't care what you claim about his defense. This guy's not shooting 48% from downtown all season long, and he's not shooting 51% from the field, and he's not shooting 90% at the foul line. It's not going to hold. I'm certain of it. He also has committed a grand total of 1 turnover in 6 games. Not that he's a high turnovers guy, but it's usually more like a turnover per game instead of 1 every 2 weeks. So there's so many things with Dort that are about to go the wrong way. And maybe Isaiah Hartenstein's return has a negative impact on everyone even closely related to a front court, even if Dort's not really a front court guy. In any event, there's like almost nothing about what he's doing right now that feels like it's going to stick, other than you might be able to argue the steals could just be better. If because the Thunder have so much defense that it allows him to be a tiny bit more risky, try to force some mistakes instead of just never letting anybody get by him, maybe that's a thing that gets a little bit better this year. Maybe the blocks get a little bit better, but the percentages jump. Nah. 3 players left to discuss. Royce O'Neale at 68. This one screams player on a heater. Just shouting it from the rooftops, because O'Neale he got off to a very quick start. And right now, the field goal percent has come back down a little bit after a quieter last ball game. He's at 9 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, 0.7 steals, a block, and 1.8 3-pointers. And so some of this stuff with O'Neale could actually hold. The issue, I think, with Royce, and by the way, he's a guy that we've had on fantasy teams plenty of times over the years, is, for one, he hasn't missed a free throw yet this season after being a guy who's not a great foul shooter and almost never gets to the line. Now suddenly he's 8 for 8 or 10 for 10 or something like that so far this year. That's unexpected. The rebounding being better is the thing I would point to with O'Neale and say that's actually something that could be better because the Suns are running Royce O'Neale as part of small ball lineups. He's not out there as a power forward with, or at least not as often, with like a big center clogging up the middle. He's out there with, sometimes at least, Kevin Durant or himself as the center. The blocks, as a result, are also a little bit higher on O'Neale. And what I don't know, and I'll be honest with you guys, this player I wanted to get in the mix here because the answer, I believe, is we don't really know yet if this iteration of Royce O'Neale could actually persist somehow. I will point at a couple of things and say these probably won't last. Shooting 100% at the free throw line, probably not going to last. 42% from downtown, probably not going to last, but it's not insane. He's pretty much been right around 38, 39% from 3 his entire career for 7 years running. He could just have an up season from 3-point land. It could just be a better year for him, even if it does come back a little bit. And so that would then mean that his overall field goal percent is just a little bit better as well. But the thing that I don't think we know exactly, and it'll depend a little bit on how the NBA's tracking data suggests what position he's playing, but regardless, he is part of, on the whole, smaller lineups right now than he usually is. That's, I think, the big takeaway. There are going to be lineups that have centers. There are going to be lineups where KD's listed as the center. It's going to be he's listed as a power forward or small forward or whatever. But the guys around him are just not as big. Nurk is not on the floor all the time. Plumlee's not on the floor all the time. There are more opportunities for Royce O'Neale to be a rebounder or a rim protector. Heaven forbid. He's not a big dude, but at 6'6", sometimes if you're like the tough dude on the team, you might just have to go back there and be a little bit of a center. Will one block a game hold? Probably not. But if he was just logging a bunch of small forward and power forward minutes in a normal kind of traditional NBA lineup, I would say we know that number's coming down. But because we're watching the Suns roll small ball at times, not all the time, but sometimes, we don't know. Royce O'Neale might just have a better rebounding rate this year and a better block rate this year because the guys around him just aren't as good at rebounding and shot blocking and aren't as big. Like, he had a year in Utah where he averaged 7 rebounds a game. Admittedly, he was playing 31 minutes then instead of 26 now. But I don't think Royce O'Neale is dead to rights. I don't think he's going to end up at number 68 because I think the percentages come down a little bit, and I think the rebounding rate comes down a little bit, and I think the block rate comes down a little bit. But we might be looking at a Royce O'Neale that's like a 9th rounder or better. And that's not dead in the water. That's somewhat useful. Ochai Agbaji. I had a lot of trouble, I'll admit, with round 7 in this game because pretty much every surprising player in round 7 was a guy that was there because of someone being injured. And maybe I could have gone the other way and said, here's an interesting player who's down in round 7 right now. But then you just point at percentages and say, yeah, that's going to level off. Like, Bam Adebayo is ranked 83rd, but he's also shooting 43% from the field. So you knew that wasn't going to happen. And so it left us with Ochai Agbaji, Trey Mann, and Nick Richards as the 3 guys where you're like, hey, those guys are in the 6th, 7th round. That's kind of interesting. Or we could have gone Scotty Barnes as a 7th rounder, but his is heavily because of poor percentages and turnovers, and who knows if those level off, but he's out for another 2.5 weeks or something. So I ended up landing on Ochai Agbaji, and that's boring, and Trey Mann would have been boring, and Nick Richards would have been boring, and I don't even really want to go into a bunch of detail. In fact, I think I'd rather talk about Scotty Barnes getting off to a 19.8 assist or 8 rebounds, 6 assists with 2 steals start, but he's been so bad at turnovers and free throws that all the positive work he's done in those other categories has kind of gone out the window. So we're going to kind of skip over round 7, and we're going to jump straight to round 8, which is the last name on the board, and that is this guy. Well, it's Jay Huff, and for those watching, they can see literally every picture you can find on the internet of Jay Huff, his mouth is wide open. I can't find a single picture of Jay Huff that's not a media day photo where his mouth is closed. He's like shouting, or I don't know what the hell he's doing. Is he laughing, smiling? He might be doing a Chewbacca impersonation. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I work with what with what is available to me. And Jay Huff at 88 is unquestionably the most surprising player in the 8th round. And in a round where there are a number of surprising names, like Alperen Şengün, who's down in the 8th round on the shoulders of his 39% field goal and 28 minutes of ball game. We've got Kevin Huerter in the 8th round, Scottie Pippen Jr. in the 8th round. We've got my man Tobias Harris at number 93, but he's on the rise, so don't worry about that. You got Jalen Brunson at pick 90. All of those guys are surprising, but no one is as surprising as the guy shooting 61% from the field, who's made all 8 of his free throws and is averaging 2 3-pointers a game and 1.3 blocks while shooting 61% from the field on, get this, 16 and a half minutes per game. This is, friends, a lovely story, and that is sadly all it is. I have Jay Huff on one fantasy team, and I'm going to ride the hot hand, but also there's no prayer that this keeps up. Absolutely, positively none. Undrafted out of Virginia, which is sort of entertaining. He is 27. He played 4 games with the Lakers 4 years ago, and his biggest work, I think you'd argue, was with the Wizards like 3 seasons back when he averaged 14 minutes a game over a week of basketball. He's a stat piler. It's not like the stat set itself for him is not that crazy. The fact that he's doing it and has done it now for 7 games is the actual crazy part. You would need a lot of guys to go down in Memphis for Jay Huff to have enough fantasy value where I would go, yeah, I actually trust this now. Because the 1.3 blocks in 16 minutes seems unlikely to continue. Not impossible, but extraordinarily unlikely. The 56% shooting from downtown, extremely unlikely. He's a good three-point shooter. We can see that. But 56%, nah. Which means that if the number of threes he's taking stays constant, 60% from the field is also probably somewhat of a difficult number to stick with. So if you want to play the hot hand and go with Jay Huff in the short term, I'm not going to stop you. But also, we all have to know that this is a fun story that is likely going to evaporate at some point in the not-too-distant future. And that, friends, is your unlikely heroes, unlikely players in each of the first 8 rounds. There's some other names in there. I mean, I'm not trying to ignore any of the players that you're like, oh, Dan, how didn't you pick this one? It's not, don't read too much into it. Other fun shows coming up in the not-too-distant future. I cannot wait to reveal them to you. I don't want to give you the heads up on that. We might be able to get one of them in tomorrow. No, because tomorrow we're going to update our Yahoo rank tracker, which, along with the streaming board, are a couple of things that I added to the Besbris Everything Google Sheet, which you can find a link to in the show description. That has all the stuff from the preseason and now the in-season stuff. Like I left the buckets page completely untouched, so you guys can go back and see where I had different guys. But my plan, at least right now, is every Wednesday I'm going to update the Yahoo rank board and see what direction guys are moving, and then we'll analyze that on a show. The streaming calendar, I really think you need if you're in a head-to-head league. That's something that you guys should have available to you. I haven't finished filling it all in yet, and I have to color code it. It's a whole lot of work, and I'm kind of doing it in little waves. So tomorrow we'll probably have our first episode of the basically a hot or cold, which is kind of what that is a player's rank on the way up, is a player's rank on the way down, and who's the hottest and the coldest in all of the NBA. Thursday, that might be when we bust out one of these other show topics that I haven't told you guys about yet. Maybe. Or maybe that's the time we got to get a buy low show going. Hey, look for me on the Roto World Fantasy Basketball Podcast later on today. I'll be joining Raphael Johnson on that show, so that should be a lot of fun. Big thanks to Raf for having me aboard. That's another spot you can catch your buddy Dan. As far as this show is concerned, we are finished. I had to think about it for a second. We're done. Recap: Jordan Poole in the first, Buddy Hield in the second, Tari Eason in the third, Bilal in the fourth, Coulibaly, Lou Dort in the fifth, Royce O'Neale in the sixth, Ochai Agbaji in the seventh, and Jay Huff in the eighth. And we can do this again a couple weeks down the line. Let's see who's the weird ones that keep popping up. I'll remind everybody, too, while I sign off, that the board doesn't typically settle until 6 weeks into the basketball season. It's not a fast process. It takes time for the board to settle. Find me over on social at Dan Besbris, DANBESBRIS, Old Man Squad. Follow the network feed, meet some of our amazing hosts. You can also join our very free Discord. That link is in the show description. I do my tweet storms every Saturday in Discord. The other 6 days of the week, I'm typically doing on Twitter. That, again, is at that at Dan Besbris link. We are Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram, should you feel so inclined, because we put out our little short videos on different topics over there. They're meant to be mostly fun. Like on your way out, subscribe on your way out, and please, Apple and Spotify listeners, hit that 5-star button. help us continue to move up the board. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad. See you guys a little bit later on today. We got a recap show to do, don't we? Later.